We're talking today with Fred Guild of Ada, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Fred, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Gratiot County, Michigan, October 2, 1925.
All right, and did you grow up there?
I grew up there. I went to a country school for 9 years, same school, same room, same school teacher, female, and that was probably, when I got out of there, figured I was done with school.
Okay, at that point, I think the law was you had to go through 8th grade, was that right?
8th grade.
Okay, all right, and how old were you when you finished school?
16.
Okay, and now that's getting like 1941, so shortly before Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay, now when you left school, what do you figure you were going to do?
Well, I went to work making house trailers in Alma.
Was that a factory set up?
It was a factory.
Okay. Now, what had your family done for a living while you were growing up? What did your dad do?
Well, my dad did a lot of odd jobs because we had just a 25-acre farm, a large family, you know. There was 7 of us children, and so that's quite a family to feed. And so we had a lot of work on the farm, and he worked out. He did odd jobs, painted in the summer, worked cutting wood in the winter. Then he finally went into making the house trailers also.
Okay. And was he able to keep the farm?
Yeah, we had the farm up until my youngest brother died, and his wife got it, and then she gave it to her 2 children, and they sold it to somebody else. I didn't get anything out of it.
Yeah.
It was lost.
Okay, because it was not necessarily easy to hang on to a farm in that period of time back in the 30s. So he managed.
Oh, well, the young girls that were there from my nieces ended up profited by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but back in the 30s when that was going on, I mean, not everybody managed to keep the family farm at that time.
No, that's true.
Okay. Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I think it was just on the radio. My dad had a battery radio, you know, a battery and a drive. It had 2 batteries to fit, you know, on it. That worked.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, before that happened, were you paying any attention to what was going on in the world, you know, war in Europe, that kind of thing?
Yes, I kept informed on what was happening. I've always been interested in world affairs, you know.
And did you think that at some point we might be getting into that?
No, I don't think it crossed my mind that I would be in the service.
Okay. And then when you learned about Pearl Harbor, did you even know where that was?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And then how did things kind of change in your community, or did they change at all after the war started?
Well, they started war plants there. Like Saginaw's Steering became a carbine plant where my mother ended up working eventually, making carbines. Mm-hmm. And
now, did the place that you worked at, did that convert to war production?
no, that one stayed with trailers.
Okay. And did the military buy trailers or use them in places, or?
No, I don't know of any place that they bought trailers.
Okay. So it's still civilian production as far as you can tell. Okay. And then...
I know, I was going to say, when I worked there, I went to work one Saturday morning, and I made out a folder. Everybody was get a raise, and they had to sign this book. So I went around, and we wanted to move it up from 10 to 15 cents an hour. I figured nickel an hour. I don't get a dime, you know.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people would sign it, and a lot wouldn't. This on a Saturday, a time and a half, you understand. Dime an hour. They caught me after a while, got me, and took me in the office, took the book away from me, and said, if you want a raise, you see Roosevelt. He froze the wages. See, I didn't know that the wage had been frozen. And if you got too many people, you can't raise it. You don't let the government. So they didn't fire me. I quit. So they said, no, you keep on working. They were nice to me. You know, 'cause my dad worked there and two brothers. So they said, "You can stay," and I said, "No, I quit."
All right. And then when you quit, what did you do next?
Well, I was trying to think of what I did. I had one brother that left and went out to Wyoming and work at the Hart Mountain Relocation Center. That's where they moved the Japanese in from the coast. So my dad said I couldn't go with him, so I just, when they weren't looking, I just got on a bus and went all the way out to Cody. They didn't know I'd gone, you know.
Wow.
So they tried to get sheriff after me, but he said, "Oh, you'll come home." But I hunted down. I didn't realize how big the outfit was out there. I couldn't find him. I stayed there till I ran out of money, and then I finally handed Montana to Billings. Got on a freight train, took a freight train back, rode that freight all the way back into Chicago.
Okay, so was that the hobo thing where you just climb
Yeah.
on and go and don't tell anyone?
Yeah, you can get thrown off while it's going too. You have to be careful. But they had double engines on them out there, come from Montana, and then we couldn't get in a boxcar inside until we got into St. Paul. We finally got a boxcar we could get in.
Okay.
We had to ride out in the open.
Well, how many of you were doing this?
Oh, there was 4 or 5 to get together and visit at night, and we, you know, and so then we would get the car we got in, and we went all the way to Chicago. I got off in the rail yard in Chicago, hitchhiked the rest of the way home, and I got home. In between sleeping jails, you know, that worked out fine.
You got put in jail?
No, I would ask, but then later on, my brother and I, we were going to California. The one had been at Cody. So we take off, take the bus to Lansing, and on out to, no, we hitchhiked to Lansing, then we took the bus to Muskogee, Oklahoma, where our brother-in-law was. And then he'd never been on a train, so I was going to teach him how to get on a train. So he had a little trouble getting on that train and catching it, you know. But we got on it, then we got to Fort Worth, and they sidetracked us, and then we started hitchhiking, and some guy pulls up and says, "Hop in," you know. We hop in. Says, "Where are you going?" "Down to the jail." "Why, we didn't do anything. You tell the judge," he says. "Yeah?" So we go down there, and it was Sweetwater, Texas. So we go in there, and they said, you know, $10 fine or 10 days. And we told them we didn't need any money, so we'd take the 10 days. So we took 10 days. We stayed there 9 days in that jail, up on the top 4th floor of the courthouse.
Okay.
They finally let us out. They came by one day and said, "You want to go now or you want to wait to eat?" And we said, "We'll go now." So,
all right. Yeah. So it's just a different way of life at that point. I mean, today most people wouldn't really think of doing those things, and
yeah. Well, it's not safe today. Then I said went on to worked in El Paso a little bit, and then we went to New Mexico and picked cotton. Gave up California. Came back to Michigan.
What was wrong with California?
Well, they told us we got let off in the desert. It would be either too hot or too cold. You know, at night they said it got real cold. Said you might come to a place and the guy lets you off, and nobody comes and you can't get a ride. And there you're out all night long in the cold weather.
Okay. So you just didn't go that far. It wasn't that you went there and
So
came
we
back.
gave up and went to Albuquerque and came back from New Mexico.
All right. So how is it that you wind up in the Army?
So then one day I went back to the trailer company I was working, and my brother says, "He's not even 18 yet. He could be smart, you know." I thought, "I'll show him I'm 18. I went right down to the Army thing, said, "I'm 18, I got to sign up, and I want to go right now." "Okay." So I didn't tell anybody. I waited till the night before. Then I told my folks. They were surprised, because I wasn't 18. But I had, twice before, I had signed up for the Navy, didn't get to go. Signed up for the Marines, didn't get to go, so I signed up for the Army. And so I made it to the Army, because I didn't let anybody know, because I was staying at my grandmother's, so I didn't tell my folks. The Navy, they sent the notice to my folks, and they said, "Hey, he's not old enough to go," and he signed his own dad's name on the paper and said he can't go. So they sent my birth certificate back, and So then the Marines, I was working in Key West, Florida on a dredge. And I went up to Miami. And I took the physical and everything, passed. Sent all the papers home. My dad wouldn't sign.
You
My
did an
mother
awful lot of moving around in the space of
Yeah, I
about 2
worked
years.
all winter, and yeah, I had worked on it. It was a great job. Nice all winter, 70-some degrees on the water. I slept out there on the dredge, ate on the dredge, went back and forth on a tug when I wanted to go to Key West and off the Navy base. I had to go through a Navy base to get on my tug and out to the dredge. But it was great weather, so I waited till spring. And then I came home. I thought I was going in the service.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't take the papers because my dad didn't sign. My mother did. My dad didn't.
Okay. Normally, one parent's signature would be enough.
No, they said if your dad had signed by himself, we would.
Okay.
But not my mother, they said.
All right. So now, but this time around, you go to the Army, sign up. So when do you actually then enter the service?
It was, I left in August. I went and signed up in July. Took 30 days off inactive reserves, and then I went in August.
Okay, so not 1943 at this
Yeah.
time. Okay. And then where do you go then from there once you sign up?
I went to Fort Custer. In Fort Custer, I went to Texas Mineral Wells area.
Okay. Do you remember the name of the base that you were at?
Yeah, I did. I've slipped my mind now.
All right. Well, that can get looked up.
It'll go back.
All right. So you sent out there. Okay, and this is where you do basic training.
Did my basic there.
Okay. Now, what did basic? Okay. As first of all, how did they get you out there?
Train.
Okay. And was it better to ride inside a train car than in the box car, or did you kind of miss the other way?
Well, you can do either. Yeah, you're right. Inside, it's easier.
All right. And then, but it wasn't anything new to you to go on a long train ride.
No.
You've done that before. Okay. Now, what did the basic training actually consist of? I mean, what did they do with you when you get there?
Well, if you, I suppose they figured we were infantry, so we'd take, infantry basic, which you learned all kinds of rifles, mortars, anti-tank guns. That's what those projectiles are back there. The 37 millimeter was what the anti-tank gun was, but then it was for Japanese tanks,
Yeah.
but not for Germans.
Not at all.
So you get up one morning, you're on the 57s. That's that big one there, the 57. And they switched over.
Okay. Now, they wouldn't probably start you on the anti-tank guns right away.
No, you had to do all your basic first.
Okay. Yeah, so talk about that, because most people have never been through it. They don't know what it consists of. I mean, what does the Army do with you when you first show up?
Well, you get a lot of physical training. And you have to learn a lot of marching. You got to get, be in formations. And then they start you out on the rifle range and a lot of hikes, 20-mile hikes, You do one 20-mile hike before you go to bed at night. That's common.
Mm-hmm.
Eat and go out on a hike and come back by midnight and go to bed.
Okay, I would think August, September in Texas would be kind of hot, too.
Yeah, it's kind of hot weather. In fact, some people pass out at 110. They put salt in the Lister bags that hang out in the sun, and because people weren't taking their salt. So that is a real problem. I think in the whole time they had one half day or day off because some guys passed out,
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing you have to be sure and take your salt. And
Now, how much emphasis did they place on discipline and following orders?
a lot. There's always a penalty for something that you don't do right, One day I was rifleman for stacking. And you when you're going to do some other thing, you're not the rifle, so you put one down, the guy hands you more, and you put these rifles in formation, round and round, so they won't fall over. It fell over. So they said, when you go back in, you tell your company commander that you let the stack fall over, and he'll figure what punishment. So when I went back, of course, like a fool, you go and tell, I don't know why you tell on yourself. They said, when something comes up, we'll find something. So they did. Said they had to clean down the whole latrine, the toilet. So I said, okay. So I started doing it, and I got the bright idea, if they aren't watching, just hose the wood all down. It's wet. And that's what I did. I just hosed the ceiling, the walls, whole works. It was all clean. I didn't have to scrub it.
All right.
But you say penalty for everything you do wrong.
Okay. And how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that way of life?
Not difficult at all. I mean, because I like the military.
Because you'd had a fair amount of freedom at different times in the over the preceding couple of years, kind of going where you wanted to, when you wanted to, but you could take orders. That was okay.
Yeah, that didn't bother me. I like it.
All right. And were you in good physical shape when you went in?
Pardon?
Were you in good physical shape?
Oh, yes, I was in physical shape.
Okay. And how long did you stay at that place in Texas?
Oh, we stayed there until December, I think it was.
Okay. Now, at this point, were you with a unit or were you just in a training unit?
We were just in training.
Okay. And now, as you moved through training, did you get to leave the base at all and go anywhere?
Yes, you could get passes into mineral wells.
Okay. And was there anything to do in mineral wells?
Oh, there's a lot of things. Get a tattoo on your arm, which people say you're crazy, but you get called in for that too because that's illegal. You're ruining government property.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they tell you. That you're GI and you could be court-martialed. But I got one. And they said, okay. I also cut my hair into an Indian mohawk. I got called in on that one too. They said we like short haircuts, but nothing fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, I said, sir, I was standing in formation that night, and you guys came by and said, need a haircut. Now I said I'd just gotten one, and so I thought I'd show you. And he said, well, it doesn't have to be fancy. At that time, I was taking up novice boxing. At the time, I was in the boxing training session. But, yeah, he said, what are you going to do when you go to town? I said, just take my cap off, like I always do. I don't care. I had shaved both sides of my head. No one would cut it for me. I asked them to. And then I just cut off both sides, shaved my head, and left a streak down the middle here, and that was it.
All right. Now, once you got to December, now what happens to you?
Well, I signed up to go to parachute training.
Okay. And how did you wind up doing that?
They tell you there's, they got information on paratroopers, and anybody wants to go to the paratroopers, so they'd sign up. So I just went and signed up, and they said, you can't. You got to see the film first. Because they said, you might not want to sign up after you see how the training is. And I said, oh, leave my name on there. And I went and I watched the film with the guys, and I said, just leave it there.
Okay. Well, what did they have in the film? Do you remember any of that now?
Oh, a lot of hard physical work, I'm telling you. It really is. And you're a dog. You're treated dirt, I mean, you don't have a thing to say. Doesn't matter whether you're a private or a colonel. Those sergeants have full control over your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you just get treated terribly. And every day you can quit if you want to, but don't. You're called all kinds of names. They don't transfer you out like they say. They put you on KP, and you'll spend months at KP paying the price.
Oh. All right. Well, why did you decide to do that?
I don't know. I guess I thought it was an interesting thing to do, jump out of airplanes.
All right. It's a new adventure and something different. Okay. Now, so where do they send you then to train for paratroops?
To Fort Bragg, Georgia.
Okay. And now, what happens once you get there?
Well, 8 hours a day physical training. That's one thing they do. And you don't ever, you run a while and then you walk, and then you run and you walk. You can't just walk anywhere, you have to run too. And you do that for 8 hours a day for the first week or month practically. And then they, if you haven't, I already had the infiltration course, I'd do that again. So I crawled under the barbed wire fence and the machine gun going off her head about that high, and rain and the water would come up and you was nothing but mud and dirt time you got out the other end of the course.
Okay, so do they pick weather conditions like that, or do you just go whenever
no,
it happens?
Just go what you got, and besides, when it rains a lot of water in the holes where they've already set charges off, and when they set them off, they go mud and everything in the air, and then of course it makes it easier to slide underneath the wire, you know, or lay with your rifle, which is solid mud when you get back, so your rifle and everything goes right into the shower, and you don't take your clothes off, you turn the shower on.
All right. Now, what proportion of the guys who started with you, were you in a company or a platoon, or what were you in when you were training there?
Well, they're platoons.
Okay. And what proportion of the guys finished?
I would say about half of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did the rest of them just say they didn't want to do it, or?
No, they wash out. They either quit or you flunk out for some other reason. Like they called me one day and said, "You didn't keep your feet together and jumped out of the 35-foot tower." Well, I said, "You've been looking at the wrong guy, sir." I said, "I always made sure my feet were shut." They said, "You go back up and jump out and show us." This time I was really careful to make sure my feet were together, and I went out that door, and I made it.
All right. Now, so you start out with just intensive physical training, and at what point do they start to prepare you to jump out of airplanes? And then how do they do that?
Well, you have to learn all the maneuvering on a lot of other things about guiding. You have to jump out of the 35-foot towers, drop 20 feet, and slide down a cable. You have to do that. And in the meantime, you're starting to learn parachute packing, you know, because you had to pack your own chutes, reserve and all. That's your life. You're responsible. And so, in the meantime, all this physical and push-ups keep going. And they'll ask you, "Did you do any penalty push-ups this week?" If you say no, you're going to do something. Because you're going to get it. If you say anything against the person's state, you're going to get push-ups. They do that all the time to you, you know. You can't argue with them.
All right. Now, so you're doing that. You learn to pack the parachutes. You learn the stuff. Then in terms of the actual jumping, what's the sequence for that?
Well, you've got to go up a 250-foot tower. You go to buddy seat first. And two of you right up, and it comes down like the Coney Island deals, you know, where you slide back down the cables and shoot open. Then you go up alone in a harness, just by yourself. They take you up, and you get used to that. And then they, in the meantime, you learn to pack. Then they take you up about 200 feet, and then you drop a piece of paper to see which way the wind is. Because this time, when it hits the top, it's going to float away. And you're going to land out there by yourself. So you get a lot of that in, you know, drifting away and learning to land and tumble so you won't hurt your legs when you hit the ground.
Now, at that stage, are you jumping off that tower, or are you just watching the paper go?
When it hits the top, it releases the whole chute because the chute will open. It's like a big ring.
Yeah.
They got them at Six Flags over Georgia, probably. But I know Coney Island had them.
Okay.
Because I tried to get my folks to go off it. But yeah, that's more scary than jumping out of airplanes, dropping off the tower.
And where does the 35-foot tower come into it?
Those are mock-up. It looks like a fuselage of an aircraft with the door open, and you got just a harness on, hooked to a strap that will drop down 20 feet, and that's like to take up the shock when you jump out of a plane.
Okay.
And you have to get up there and get ready and go when they hit you, and you jump out like you're jumping out of an airplane. And then you drop the 20 feet, and then it's on a cable that glides down, and you land on the ground down there. You stop your feet when it hits the ground. And that's like going out the plane door. It's like landing when you come down to hit the ground.
Okay. All right. Now, so you've done that. You've done the 200-foot tower. What comes next?
And now you got your chute. You've learned to pack it, and they're going to take you up and jump you 2,200 feet.
All right.
Up an aircraft.
And do you remember your first jump?
Yeah, it was great.
Okay. How did it describe it?
I was number one in the first stick, standing in the door, my hands on the outside like that. And I said, now when I go out, just kind of kick my foot out so the prop blast would turn. And he said, "Oh, you'll turn. Don't worry about it." So when he said, "Go," I was out the door like that, you know. And Never fazed me. I always glad to jump out. It was fun. I volunteered sometimes. Just went up and jumped for the fun of it.
All right. And so I take it you were pretty good at landing then?
Yeah. When I first jump, it was such an easy landing that you hardly know you hit the ground. And I have hit the ground pretty hard where it hurt. You keep slipping because sometimes you slip because you don't like the one location, so you spill air out. And when you spill air, you come down faster. And so you guide the chute where you want to hit. Like if there's a tree there, you're going to miss a tree, And,
okay. Now, what opens the chute when you jump out of the plane?
it's a static line. In other words, your chute is packed in there, and then the back cover is fastened to the apex of the chute, and then it's laced with string all around the outside. And if you get it too strong, it'll drag it behind the plane. It won't break off. And then you stow a static line, a web thing that hooks to a cable that slides down the airplane, the cable inside from front to back. And you're taking, when you jump out, then it breaks the string all around the cover and it pulls the chute out. It's because you don't have a pilot chute. Like on these, they have pilot chutes. They pull them out, little ones. So then that part stays with the airplane, the static line of the backpack cover. It'll hang on the outside and they pull them back in.
But this way, you don't have to worry about when you would pull your own ripcord or anything like that.
No, ripcord. You pull the ripcord. If that one fails, you have to pull the ripcord on the other one.
Okay. All right. Now, how many jumps were you required to make?
You had to make 4 in the daylight and 1 in the dark.
And how many did you wind up making?
16.
Okay. So you did like it.
Yeah, I do. I went up and I put on some demonstrations of explosions at the demolitions camp. We haven't got that far yet. But,
okay. All right. So you get through that. All right. And now, do you graduate and go on, or what happens to you once you make your jumps?
Well, when you got your 5 jumps in, they give you wings. And now you graduate. You either get transferred out to an outfit, and I suppose it all depends on whether you're any good or not for something else. That's what they probably decide. So they put me in demolition school, and I went 1 week and I quit because they can't make you go. It's a volunteer.
All right. Well, what was that week like? What were you doing then?
You have to learn all about explosives. You have to learn the rate of detonation. You have to know the force, everything. High order, low order, the makeup, chemical of it, all that. All about the primer cord, the burning cord, the electronic caps that you set off or make booby traps. You learn all that. Well, that's a 4-week course. See, I quit, and I kept saying, send me overseas. I want to go. And they said, no, you don't want to be just an average soldier, And they said, I tell you, you go back to school, we'll make a cadre. You can stay here. Well, that's not going to be true. So I went back to school not to be cadre and put in 4 more weeks. Of course, I did real good. And then I got a week home vacation and shipped overseas.
Okay. Now, why did you want to get out?
You mean out of school?
Out of the demolition school.
Oh, yeah. I didn't care for the guys that were in there with that group, and I just said that I didn't want to go to school.
Was it the people who were teaching the school or the
other
students?
No, the students.
Okay.
For some reason, they just didn't fit for me,
Okay. So, but then you did it with a different group the second time? Okay, and that worked better?
That worked better for me.
All right. Now, when you're in parachute training and then this demolition school, where were the other guys from?
Well, they were all paratroopers.
Yeah, but were they from different parts of the country or mostly from the same areas?
Mainly I couldn't stand what I called city slickers.
Okay.
From the country. And I just didn't like a lot of the city slickers. Because city slickers are not the best soldiers. Farm boys, they'll tell you is a better soldier. And they're more accurate with weapons, too, than the city people.
Yeah, I suppose you're used to doing things outdoors.
Yeah.
And using longer guns.
Yeah.
If you have any experience at all. Okay. So now you've gotten through this. So at what point now did you complete the demolition school when was that?
Let's see. Must have been first part of May, I think, of
Okay.
44.
44 now.
44.
Okay, we're into 44.
Yeah.
All right. And so then pretty quickly after that, now you're being sent overseas.
Yeah.
All right. So where did you ship out of?
We left out of New York.
Okay. And what kind of ship were you on?
We were on the Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
18,000 soldiers and 500 nurses.
All right. And did you see anything of the 500 nurses on that trip?
I didn't. I spent most of my time in the brig.
Okay. How'd you manage that?
Well, it wasn't easy. I had to work at it. In fact, they were going to charge us all with mutiny, taking over the ship, you know. You know how paratroopers are. They kind of took over the whole thing for a while. The British were not happy about it. So they came down and they said, well, you know, I told them a story and I had a knife and I could tell real good stories. And the story was, I said, I can place this knife on the floor and we go to bed and one of us in the morning will be dead. You talk about scaring the people. There's only 36 in the stateroom, you know.
Right.
And the decks are, you know, you have to rotate, so you can't always stay in your stateroom. So the OD came down and they said, you got a knife. I'd already gotten rid of the knife. I said, I don't have any, sir. I said, just take me down and put me in the brig. He said, I can't do that. That's the only reason. I said, if I kick you in the leg, you will, won't you? He says, come on, we'll go. So down the brig we went.
All right. Well, why did you want to go to the brig?
Because there were very few people in the brig, you know.
Okay.
And I had a room to myself. And I didn't have to stay in the little one. I could stay in all these British prisoners, 2 or 3 of them. I learned all about the coins and everything in England, learned all about England. and these guys are out there sleeping on the deck. You know, I had a place to sleep. And I wasn't crowded at all. So I stayed there the whole trip then, in the brig, and got out. Missed my shots, of course. And they took me up, like, for breakfast and said, can you find your way back? And I said, I'll try. And, you know, we had two brigs, one down by the engine room and one up higher one. I had a good one. And it was nice, and they got me some soft drinks and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was more pleasant there. Well, you weren't with all the guys, but, you know, you weren't crowded either. You didn't have to sleep out on the deck on the floor, you know.
Okay. Now, did the ship sail by itself?
Yes.
Yeah.
We went alone. We had to escort short ways out, and then it went all the way alone, all the way to Glasgow, Scotland.
Okay. And then what happens there?
That they load you off on some cattle boat or sheep boat. We had a sheep boat, you know, place where the sheep. Took us down to Liverpool, and then because they wouldn't take the big ship down there.
Yeah.
It was too close to the war zone. So we go into Liverpool, and then we get shipped over to Swindon and Fort Sheridan at the farm. That's where the 506 was, the demolition guys. And so we went there. And they were, at that time, I believe, in the marshalling area waiting to go on, you know, to Normandy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we were replacing them, the ones that would get killed.
Okay. All right. So you're showing up just before D-Day,
Yeah.
but you're not part of it yourself.
That's right, we're not.
Okay. So once they got you to that camp, then how did you spend your time until the unit got back?
We didn't do much of anything, you know, kind of a lot of free time. I went to London. Buzz bomb came in while I was there. And they used to say the GIs were all getting parts of the souvenirs. They could find them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I went off, knocked plaster off the ceiling, but you could hear it cutting in and out and everything, you know. It had that ramjet engine on the back, and it was just enough fuel to get it from over to London.
All right.
And,
And had you heard about those before or knew
Yeah.
what to expect?
Yeah, I had heard them.
Okay. And I think they say that when the engine cuts out, that's when you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're going out a couple times, and then you know it's going to come in.
Okay. And how close did it hit to where you were?
I would say probably enough to knock plaster off the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
That's how close it was.
And you could walk over and find the place where it hit.
No, I didn't go look. I went
Okay.
back next morning back to camp. You know, I just been in London. I had gone down to Buckingham Palace that day, and I said to my wife, you know, I went down because I was going to marry the Queen, but she didn't come out. You know, I said she's my age, you know, and I said I went down there, but I didn't see her.
Well, she wasn't queen yet, at least Elizabeth.
She was only 18 then, like I was.
All right. Okay, so you did that, and then were you getting any? How much news did you have about I guess, do you remember anything about D-Day itself? Did you see or hear anything, or did you just learn later what happened?
No, you don't hear too much about it in camp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, you don't get that amount of news, and
Well,
until the guys come back.
Right.
Then when they come back, because pretty soon after a month they start bringing them back. Then you meet all the guys.
Okay. Now, what specific unit were you now part of?
The 506 Regimental Headquarters Company Demolition Platoon. That was
Okay.
who it was assigned to.
All right. And how many new guys were there for the demolition platoon?
I really don't know.
Okay. But how big was the platoon once the guys got back and you got together?
Must have been about 30.
Okay. And what did the guys who were in Normandy, what did they tell you? Or did they tell you anything about what they saw or what they did?
Yeah, they had some stories. So, yeah, I learned to listen and learn, because that's how you survive.
Mm-hmm. I mean, did they have any practical advice to offer about either jumping or fighting the Germans, or?
Well, I don't know, just keep your head down, I guess, and stay alert, you know.
Okay. Once they were back, did you do any training, or did you just, again, wait for something else to do?
No, you still train. You go on night marches. You go, you know, out in the fog when you can't see where you're going. And, you know, there's always training going on. And you're always preparing for another mission. See, there's always another one.
Okay. Now, did you do any of that training before the other guys got back?
For another mission?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, after they came back and they all got back, then they would get ready for another one, and then you would get a call, and they would tell you they didn't tell you where you're going. They just put you in a camp. You go to a barbed wire fence and stay inside there. You don't get out again, you know.
Now, what was the function of the demolitions platoon? What kind of work were you told you might have to do?
Well, you do like any soldier that go in. You have to, you know, have a line, a sector that you have. And then after that, when you no longer have a sector to take and move forward, your work mainly is all nights, you know, outside of blowing up ammunition dumps or German command posts. You go over to the other side and blow their posts up, because that's their job, you know, put charges against the side and blow the house down if you can.
Okay. All right. Now, of course, the next operation you get will be Market Guard and the drop into the Netherlands. Did you have any specialized training or preparation for that?
Yeah, well, all of it does, yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of things were they teaching you to do once?
Well, you know what you're going to do, because everybody's got an assignment, what they're responsible for. You know, everybody knows what everybody else is going to do, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd say unless you're, then when it's stationary, you pull all the listening posts, outposts, and your patrols ahead of your lines. That's their job.
Okay.
You know, you don't, the other guys, they go sleep at night. You go up at night, clear across from the German lines to get prisoners if you have to.
So you're really functioning as scouts or reconnaissance. And
Yeah, that's
so
exactly.
the demolition, the expectation is that you blow things up.
You do blow things up. You do plant charges on the enemy side. You do blow up dumps. You take duds out and blow them up. You put them on your lap and go out of town somewhere if shells don't go off and put a charge on and blow them up.
Mm-hmm.
And if a tank comes by, you blow a tank up if you have to. They have charges, you know, that's magnetic, that looks like a half a hubcap. You lay down, let it run over you, and then stick it on the bottom, and it blows through the bottom of the tank. There's, you know, when they train you, they have you lay in a trench, and they run these treads over you. These tanks drive over you while you're laying in a small, shallow spot like that, and you're on your back, and this tank tread goes right over you like this, a big tank, to give you the feeling of a tank going over you. So you can lay down there and stick these things on, you know. Because when you go in, you're carrying in explosive, plastic explosives in your pocket. You know, you're loaded with it. And like you talk about training, in a lot of places in England, different places, when they're out there training, we're out there throwing charges amongst the troops to simulate mortar and artillery fire. So they'll know not to gather up. And we'd see them gather up, we'd light one, toss one over. And some people got mad, you know. We say, we got the colonel backing us. Who you got backing you? Because the guy said, I got live ammunition. We say, we got the colonel.
All right. Now, the Market Garden expedition involved, among other things, capturing a large number of bridges, and the Germans, in a lot of cases, might have those wired for demolition. So were you also trained to disarm explosives?
Yeah, we take booby traps out. You have to take and get rid of the explosives that are there. And it just so happened, of course, our bridge got blown up. That was the one that we were supposed to save, you know. But we didn't get there because our plane got shot down. See, we didn't get there till late at night. And that's what I said to the leader 50 years later. I said, you had to go and blab to everybody. It was the only bridge that got blown. He says, well, I don't think anybody could have saved it, you know, because it really was wired. But they put pontoons across, and everything went across on pontoons. All
right. I was going to go back into your story. So basically, once the guys get back, you train for a while, and then all of you are put into a camp, and you're basically locked in until it's time for the Market Garden mission.
Until you go on the airplane.
To start. Okay. So take us through, then, that flight and that landing now. What happens to you that day? I mean, first of all, what time of day do you actually take off?
Well, we took off on Sunday morning. And
okay, and about how long was the flight?
Was it about 4 hours, 3 hours?
All right.
Not fast planes at all.
I mean, is it C-47s or 46s?
C-47s, yeah.
Okay.
They're going only from Ranbury Aerodrome to the whole directions of their azimuths and how they went this way and that way and that way. And I think there was... I don't even know if it tells there, but
so you weren't flying in a straight line to where you were in the drop zone.
No, there's no straight line going over it. It tells how many miles you flew one direction, and then how it changed to different degrees, and the whole list there from the missing air crews. That's where I got my information to find out what happened to my plane. It got shot down.
Okay, so you're in the plane. What do you remember about that flight?
Well, I remember the people all peeing in the pail and then spilling it on the floor of the plane, you know. And they might as well use the floor. It also was the only jump I made without a reserve, just a backpack. I had one chute.
Why did you only have one chute?
Well, I just went jump. I was wearing that, you know, I couldn't get the chute snapped on. That's that thing right there. That's a reserve.
Okay.
And you'll see how heavy that is. And so you got a musette bag, you got a belt of ammunition, you got pockets of explosives in, you got your musette bag with plastic explosive maps, some clothes, and I had some cigars in there too. A couple knives in your boots, 2 bandoliers of ammunition, several hand grenades. I was ready. I had a lot of hand grenades. They're heavy too, those things are, you know. Then you got a rifle down front, you got a canteen, you got a shovel, you got a bayonet, you got, what else did I have? A gas mask.
Did you carry any rations?
Enough for 3 days.
Okay. And those are in cans, at least parts of them, right?
No, they were little chocolate bars.
Oh, they're just the bars. Okay.
Yeah, ours were little bars. And you have all that, and you know, and I couldn't snap my chute on. I just couldn't get a snap, so I said, I just threw it down, and they said, put it in a plane anyway, because we don't want it laying out here.
Okay.
Of course, plane got shot down, I know.
All right. Now explain what a musette bag was.
Well, that's like a small carrying case that Used to be only officers had it, and it's like a backpack with it. You could put it over and flip it back over your shoulders, or you can snap it on. You know, I have a couple on there. I didn't bring one down here, but anyway, it's a small pouch-like thing with a flap that goes down over it, and then you can strap it shut and carry everything in it.
And in the Normandy jump, at least, some of the accounts suggest that some of those were bigger, and those actually caused a lot of problems when they were jumping. So had they changed what they were doing with them or how they were using them, or did they not really tell you that?
Well, they didn't necessarily change the package carry-on. They changed the way of, you didn't have to put an artillery wheel on your leg and a barrel on your leg and all that crap with a 20-foot rope to let go before you got there.
Okay.
You know, and we went in with rifles loaded and assembled.
Mm-hmm.
They learned you don't assemble them in the dark or assemble them. They also learned that a day jump is better than a night jump. You don't have so much confusion.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Okay. So now you're flying, and then are the planes flying in a formation of some
Right.
kind together? Okay. And then what happens to your plane?
It gets about 3 good whacks, you know. And then you see a flame going by the door, you know, engine's on fire. You just stay in there until it gets so hot you can feel it through your shoes. And they say, hey, it's getting warm in here, you know. And you're carrying 6 cargo chutes of napalm flamethrower stuff underneath, and you think that's what's burning, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's the engine burning.
Okay. Now, did you get an order to jump, or did you guys just start to go?
We have to wait until they tell you to jump.
Well, did you have an officer with you, or?
Yeah, we have 1 or 2. There was one guy that said, young from Texas, he said he told the pilot to turn the light on for the guys to jump.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether he said it for sure or not, but because he was, at that time he was talking to me about it, he was talking about getting a silver star for her, telling the guy to get the guys out of there, you know, because he figured he saved all their lives. And so I said, well, I don't know if he did, but anyway, they said jump out, and there was a guy assigned to trip the switches for the cargo chutes, and they were all right. They weren't on fire. So then the plane just kept going for another 4 miles, belly landed, and kept running burning after it landed.
Okay. But you guys jumped out before all that happened.
Oh yeah, we got out.
Okay. Now, how far were you from your drop zone when you jumped?
I would say we probably could have made it another 10 miles or so less if the plane had, because I think the plane went 4 miles. I think it went 5 miles off. It didn't land on a drop zone. Other planes did. There was a couple that got shot down, landed outside. One plane, the fire went out when it hit the dirt. The dirt put the fire out, you know. But ours didn't. It says it was not recoverable. Of course it wasn't recoverable. You can see that.
Okay. So you guys jump out. Now, how many of you were in that plane?
There was 12 of us, if I remember correctly. I got the whole list there. Usually you didn't have... Usually you could carry 18 for combat. Only you could have 24 if they didn't have combat, all the junk, you know. But I think it was 18 with that, and then you got a crew of 4 or 5, you know. You got the pilot, the co-pilot, the radio, the crew chief. Yeah.
And then, now did you have a couple fewer men because you had more equipment or more stuff to carry?
Yeah, we had fewer men.
Okay. So when you land, did you land together in a group?
No, I got together with 3 other guys. There was 4 of us. Now the other guys got together somewhere because I can't know why they didn't get together. But anyway, I came down. There was a tree there. Only time I ever hit a tree was that one there, and I was trying to miss it, and it kind of threw me over. and I got my chute off, May West off. That's the life jacket.
Right.
I got that life jacket. Then I took off and I thought, oh, I left my zip bag there. I'm not going back and get it. You know, it's there, it's there. So I lost that right off the bat, but because that orange vest you're wearing, it really stands out in that green woods, you know, and the green trees, and I'm not going to go back and pick that thing up, you know, with that vest and everything there, because it's 4th of July going off, you know. So that's what it's like, 4th of July.
Okay.
I always tell people it's like 4th of July, fireworks all over, you know, like.
All right. So your plane had been hit by anti-aircraft fire?
Yeah.
Okay. But not German planes?
No, not planes, and aircraft.
Okay. So you got 4 of you together. Now what do you do?
Well, we know which way we're supposed to be going, so we start heading to our objective. And some people go, they tell me they went up the canal, and we cut straight across the field and kept going until we got to the bridge, which was already blowing up, you know, by the time we get there.
Okay. And now was the rest of the platoon there? I mean, rest of the platoon gathered there?
They did get up there by time. We all got there by night. These guys went up. They had to knock out some 88s. So.
And did the demolition unit do that? Or infantry?
Demolition.
Okay.
Yeah, our demolition guys. That's what I was with, you know, the demolition.
Right.
All the guys in the plane were demolition guys. And so they got a few of those 88s, and then we stay at Zahn and head for Eindhoven the next day. We stay there. So.
Okay. And again, you're just walking at this point.
Yeah, now we got to get all the way down to Eindhoven. The Germans are all the way along, you know. They're all over the place. They didn't like us too well, I guess.
Did you link up with any infantry, or were you just on your own?
No, we're on our own. It's just our group. And we head south, and we run into the rest of the paratroopers as infantry later on. We get down to Zahn, or Eindhoven.
Eindhoven, yeah.
And then we're supposed to be done. But it didn't work that way.
Okay.
Bridges got caught. The roads got cut.
So now what do you wind up doing?
Well, first we head up north and open it up. And we thought we were done. Then they cut the road again. This time we went north and widened it up a little further. And we kept going all the way up to, we call it the island up there, by the Rhine.
Yeah. Well, there's like the island highway, or between, I guess, Nijmegen and Arnhem.
They call it the island. That's only because it's between I call it the wall and the Lek. But they say that one of them is called the Lek, must be lower part or higher part of the Rhine or something. Yeah. See, I didn't know that.
That's what they have at Arnhem, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But Nijmegen, and of course, is where the bridge was all right. They had this one hole in it. They put boards over. Bomb had hit it or shells. So.
Now, as you were going, were you involved in any combat yourself, or were you waiting? Okay.
Yeah, we have to, I'd say, do our own share of that.
So what kinds of things were you doing then?
Oh, just normal, like a soldier does, you know. Just make sure the enemy's not there anymore.
So you're patrolling or actually attacking positions?
Well, we have to do attacking until we got stationary lines. We always have to attack. We have our own sectors to clear out, you know. And,
okay. And what kind of opposition were you facing? Were there a lot of Germans, or how did they behave?
Oh, there's a few.
But was it the kind of thing where they would shoot to stop you and force you to deploy to attack them and then pull out, or do they fight to the finish, or what happens?
Well, it all depends on the information they have about us. Because before that, where the information was out that we don't take prisoners. And the colonel says we're going to have to take prisoners because it's getting tougher to have them give up, you know. But if they even look like they're going to fight, shoot them. But he said word got out and we didn't take prisoners. And But if you're behind lines, like we were most of the time, what are you gonna do with prisoners? You can't spend spend your personnel
Mm-hmm.
take care of people, So
Okay. So was your whole platoon functioning together, or was it split into groups, or how did it work?
well, I say demolition. When we're stationary, we stayed together as a platoon, and we had to uh, do all the night work every night. It was kind of boring. Boring. We had to go up. If you laid there all night in some old apple orchard and for the enemy, you can hear them playing harmonicas and talking, and we had to have sound power phones that you whistle in, and it went to an outpost which had a battery operated one. It went to the rear somewhere, and he would call in our artillery or mortar, but they couldn't call it in where we knew our patrols were. But you'd whistle and listen a little bit, and he could hear it in the outpost. This is sound posts on each side, and then he would crank up and get the back here, and they'd tell you where to fire the artillery or mortars.
Mm-hmm.
We even did it because the guy played harmonica one night. Got him with mortars,
Mm-hmm.
and so he stopped playing that, and you could hear vehicles moving around. They must have picked up some Germans that night.
All right. Now you're basically, so you keep. Now, did you cross the Maas at Nijmegen and keep going, or what happened there?
At Nijmegen?
Yeah.
Well, we went further. We were up at Zetten was our regimental headquarters at that time, and we would go out from Zetten up to the Rhine and across, and get the British back. The British got stuck there,
Right.
At Arnhem.
So were you involved in helping ferry them back?
I stayed on this side I didn't ferry them back.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So,
Now, over the course of this time, how much did you actually see of the Germans?
how much what?
Did you see of the Germans? Were they always hidden, or could you see them?
You see a lot of them.
And did they have many vehicles or tanks, or were they mostly infantry that you saw?
They had vehicles and tanks. A lot of tanks at Arnhem.
At Arnhem, yes. But in the areas that you were operating.
No, we didn't have as many tanks because where we were, it was all dikes and low ground.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't travel on the dikes, you could get in a lot of trouble. The vehicles. That's the reason they talked about the Germans were going to flood it. They did. When we left, they flooded it.
Mm-hmm.
They blew the dike on the Rhine up there. They showed us we went down the river in a boat, and they showed us where it was blowing.
Mm-hmm.
The people did after we left, because we were replaced by the 51st Highland Division, came in, and they blew it on them.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 24 hours where you'd have to get out of there. We had amphib ducks up there, everything waiting to ride out in case it flooded.
Yeah.
So we had to make it.
All right. Now, once you kind of got up into that sector, I mean, did you learn essentially what had happened at Arnhem and?
Yeah, we knew why we were up there. Principally to get the British. They didn't like it there either. They should have known that all the outfit was there. I don't know how you couldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, there was that, and it was kind of a far-fetched plan to begin with, because there was only the one highway they could use in the latter part to get up there, and of course you mentioned the Germans would block it, and you have to clear them out, and they block it again, you clear them out. It took too long.
Yeah. They should have. I don't know why they didn't know it. And I say we were supposed to be there 3 days, and we were there 72.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When they finally do get you out of there, what do they do with you?
Then we go back to Montmelon, France.
Okay. And what kind of place was that?
That's sort of a military academy for the French.
Mm-hmm. And what part of the country was that in? Kind of northeast, sort of toward Germany, but not all the way there?
Well, it's not too far. All of Belgium.
Yeah.
we were looking forward to being there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We thought.
Okay. And how long did you wind up staying there?
Well, you have to realize we're still Thanksgiving up in the
Okay.
Netherlands.
All right.
And then we come back, and so you're not there even a month, and because Christmas is coming. And in December, we're on our way to Bastogne.
That's right. Because the Battle of the Bulge starts December 16th or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So you're really only there a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we weren't there too long.
Okay. Now, did anybody get a chance to go into Paris while you were there? Did you all stay in the camp?
We didn't get. Yeah, you're right. We didn't get a chance to do anything.
Okay. And had you been resupplied or re-equipped?
No resupplies at that point because we weren't going to be doing anything.
Okay. And had you taken any replacements yet? Did you get any new guys coming in?
No, we didn't have any replacements. Things were not settled down yet.
All right. So I don't know, how many men had you lost from the demolitions platoon, do you think?
I don't know. It's in the book. A few. We lost 3, just my small group. That was in Eindhoven. Yeah, it was Eindhoven.
This tape is about up, so we're going to pause right here. All right. Now we'd gotten in your story, we'd gotten your unit back from the Netherlands down to Mourmelon, France, and we were talking about losses. You said you'd lost 3 out of your group. Was that the group that you jumped out of the plane with, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so like out of that 12.
Yeah, that was to start with. That was bombed. See, we got bombed in Eindhoven,
Mm-hmm.
and they right outside of an air raid shelter. A bomb went off on the sidewalk, and of course, brick flying all over.
Mm-hmm.
That's killed some of them. And I laid down flat on the ground in the air raid shelter under the seat. And he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "Guild." They said, "Get up on the bed." I said, "No, it's safer down here because explosions go like this,
Mm-hmm.
And their air raid shelter was built above ground, just corrugated steel.
Okay.
Because you put it in the ground to get too much water. So I stayed down there, and it was enough because the first thing, it knocked me off the seat, the first bomb, and the second I was laying underneath it. I wouldn't get up on the seat. And so that way it would be safer. And some of the guys got hit when they went out to see if people came in, and then the bricks were flying, and the bombs. And the British truck, they were trying to get down the sidewalk, and they're caught on fire, and ammunition's going off, and they said, "You'll go out and see what they did." And I said, "I know what it is. I'm not going out there and see what's going on." Well, I stayed in the air raid shelter. I wouldn't go out and let the truck burn. I mean, I couldn't put the fire out. So, of course, we had some guys died. They took to the hospital and they died, but...
Well, you still have most of the platoon still there at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're only there a couple of weeks. You get to the middle of December, Battle of the Bulge starts.
Yeah.
Now, what happens to you guys? What do they do with you?
Well, they come up one morning and say, "Hey, we're moving up to Bastogne, And I said, "Well, I gotta go. I got a bad tooth. I gotta go see the guy about my tooth that was killing me." And they said, "You just don't want to go." I'll go. So I didn't go to the dentist.
Mm-hmm.
I just went. Well, my face swelled up like that, Of course, I lost that tooth,
Mm-hmm.
It abscess, and they had to pull it. And of course, VA pays for all my teeth. They fix all my teeth. I don't.
All right. Well, when did they get around to pulling that tooth?
Oh man, way after the war.
Oh, okay. So you just had the tooth bothering you at
Yeah.
that point. Okay. Now, how did they get you to Bastogne?
Big old cattle cars, semis, open to the top, no cover, just sides on.
Okay. And then what do you remember about the drive up to Bastogne?
It was quite a ride, and it was cold, and we didn't have winter clothes. A lot of because we weren't ready for winter. We out of ammunition.
And what did you see as you got closer to Bastogne? Do you see any other Americans going the other way, or anything like
Yeah, a lot of them going that way. Now they're going south. We're going north. But one of our guys even traded a map for a machine gun off some vehicle. He was going along and got the machine gun. Then they fought over who's going to fire the machine gun. I carried the fuse. It's my turn. You know.
Well, did they get any ammunition for the machine gun, or just the gun?
They got some when they got it.
Okay.
But for rifle ammunition and stuff, I said a lot of the guys were, because those guys apparently had never been in combat before, and when they got attacked, they got overrun, so they're leaving.
Yeah.
They don't want to be in there. Get out of there fast. We're idiots. We're going in. So yeah, it was unbelievable. I don't think we we didn't have all the briefing. It was just a matter of you're going out. There was no marshalling area where it's like a, plan of attack. It was just you get in there and stop them.
So what did your unit wind up doing? Did you actually go into the middle of the town of Bastogne, or did you get sent someplace?
No, we stayed out on the edge of Bastogne, out near a cemetery, in some German barracks. And an air raid shelter was half underground, half above ground. And somehow we tied up with me and the other guys that were with me with a 705 tank destroyer outfit. They got caught. They couldn't get out. If they could have gotten out, they would have gone, And they'd never been in combat before either. So,
now, tank destroyer is a term
it looks like a tank.
We use loosely. I mean, was it the M10 with the open top turret and the long 76, or was
They have a 75.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got 75. And this guy was telling how great those 75s were. Yeah, well, he wasn't that great, and they weren't that great at shooting. They were pretty poor.
All right. So now, were you manning part of a line, or were you in reserve somewhere? Or?
We did the first part in, and then after freezing in foxholes and snow, that deep, and drift you in 5 minutes, practically. You had to change every hour, get the guys out of the hole and put new ones in. You walk across the field, you fall in holes. It's been dug before. You down a hole. And we dug a big hole. 2 of us could sleep in it, lay out in it. A lot of rock, And a big old bomb lands, and it must have been a 500-pounder. Chunks of dirt like this. We had put logs over the hole, and they jumped up and down when that bomb went off. Big chunks of dirt coming down. Because it wasn't too far from us when it went and blew up. And he had dropped a few 100-pounders, but that 500-pounder really put a hole in the ground. And I'll tell you, I just dropped. I was looking, boom. So I said, it looked like a lot of fire went off. But boy, I'm telling you, that was a lot of jumping up and down.
Now, at that point, was that a German plane that was doing that?
German plane.
Okay. And now, was the weather cloudy at that point, or overcast?
Not when he did it.
Okay.
No, he was. Of course, he wasn't too high. I said to the guys, I think that sounded like he was opening and closing door, on his plane, throwing the bomb. They said, no, that was a release mechanism when the bombs were let go from underneath. You get popped. I could hear that noise, and I thought the guy was opening and closing the door of the plane.
Yeah, because one of the things was at the beginning of the campaign, the weather was mostly bad, and the Americans weren't flying.
Yeah, it was. We couldn't get resupplied. That was one thing that happened to us, that we could not be resupplied. And what you'd think they didn't have the technology then that they had now. Now you don't need to see anything. You can get in there. But
okay, so you were basically along, at least for a while, a front line position.
Yeah.
Snowing, bad weather. Did the Germans actually attack you on the ground?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some for some reason, I say we did get some bombs. We had some 100-pounders, even on a house we was in. and everybody was trying to make for the basement, but because we got eventually where we stayed in houses, we didn't stay outdoors. It's too cold.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. Now, when they attacked on the ground, was it just infantry that came after you? Were they probing, or were they really seriously attacking?
no, they were trying to either surrender or annihilate. They said they're going to annihilate us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they let us go in there, and then they closed it. They watched us drive in. They let all the trucks drive back out. They did. And then they closed the line.
When we first got there, they were still coming up one side, we were in the other, but by the time the division got in there, yeah, they were closing both sides.
Yeah, they said they'd let all the trucks go back out, so we wouldn't have any trucks in there. And then they closed it. And we never knew it until we tried to send people out.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't send wounded out anymore. See, they had to keep them. We had 300 of them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I mean, if you didn't have ammunition, how did you manage to stop the Germans when they attacked you?
Well, you have to share what you got. If you got a dozen rounds, you give the guy 6 with you. You know, he gets 6. And so you use that. And then you can use your German guns if you got them. Use their gun. And I even used their pants. I put their pants on, and I put a coat on of theirs. And one day when we got shelled and everything, I grabbed a German helmet to run out of the barracks. And I thought, hey, I'd better not wear that helmet. And I ran out and got in the air raid shelter outside. But no, you did what you could. And then when they did drop the cargo chutes in, made things for your boots out of the packing on the cargo chutes and cut them and laced them up front and back, and then you had things keep warm. Keep your feet warm.
All right. Now, about how long were you in the front line, do you think?
Well,
Was it till after Christmas, or?
I would say we got back a little far because after we were on the line, we spent most of our time hunting tanks.
Okay.
We had the 705 outfit,
Mm-hmm.
and we went out and lost 2. First time out, 1 tank knocked out 2 of his tank destroyers because he didn't know enough to handle them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
He was a coward, that guy. He says, well, maybe they'll kill me. Maybe they'll kill me. You know, I'm doing push-ups down the water, almost in the ditch until the shelling stopped, and then I'd get back up, and 20 millimeters coming all over, you know. So, but what happened was he was in the Jeep, and he goes way out in the Jeep, out front, tank destroyer behind him. They don't do anything to the Jeep, you know, the German doesn't. He waits for the tank destroyer. And 1 round, he gets him right in just below the turret, right in the side. And but the guy first tried to fire on the tank. The tank was sitting up over in the field. He didn't hit him, and so this guy hits it. The driver and assistant driver jumps out and leaves it. The lieutenant from a tank guy, he jumps out of the Jeep and he leaves the Jeep. He says, oh, they're dead. I tried to throw a thermite grenade in. He missed, you know. One of our guys gets the Jeep and brings it back because he sends the second one out. The second one gets hit too, right? Same deal on the second one. Only he puts it in reverse and stalls it against the bank, you know. Then our guy gets this Jeep and he gets this 3 wounded out of that tank, takes them back to town. This guy here, they're going to kill me, you know.
Now, did the unit was there a platoon of 5 of them, or was there just the 2 tank destroyers?
Just 4 tanks.
Oh, there was 4.
We had 4 tank destroyers left. We had 4 of them that didn't get out. The 705 tank outfit, and when I tell them about this, where they hit and everything, I never thought I'd ever see that tank. But when I went back to Bastogne, it's sitting there in Multicolor Square with a hole in the side, right where I sat. And I took pictures of it moving through the hole.
All right. But at that point, the Germans weren't counterattacking. They were just sitting back and shooting at what came at them.
Yeah, with the tanks, when we hunted tanks down, it was quite foggy. And that day, we ran into these. and we had gone through town. And then when we come back, we would ride on these tank destroyers when we're going. When you get out, we'd get off and walk in the field.
Right.
But coming through town, we'd ride the tank destroyer. It was warmer there. It'd burn the handle with your shovel all coming out of the exhaust. That hot. But and then sometimes there'd be a lot of shelling, and you have to get off and go in a building to get out of the shelling because the streets were just too much shelling going on. Then when it quit, you get back on and go on back. But no, there was 2 left as far as I know. The other 2 got knocked out right away, and that guy, he never been in combat, Joe. He didn't know what to expect.
And clearly didn't know really what to do either.
No, he didn't. He had no idea.
Okay. Now, wait. Do you remember when Third Army came up to join you from the south? I mean, did that have any effect on you, or did it take a while to notice?
No, we didn't. We were glad to get out of there, but that didn't help us that much because it was not but combat till Austria until the war ended. We just never got back. Just kept going.
Well, didn't the 101st go back down through Montmelon and then up to kind of northeastern France for a while? At least in the Band of Brothers they do, where they're...
Well, a lot of those are out of Bastogne. There was Foy and a lot of those little towns.
Yeah, Foy, Neuville, and places like that they took, and we fought there for a while.
Yeah, that town got destroyed too. But Bastogne was 75% destroyed. And 50 years later, you wouldn't even know it. It was all back, cobblestones all back, and everything. You know, we stayed there a couple of days, and 50 years later. But no, after we left there, we just kept going all the way through Germany, all the way through Austria, Berchtesgaden, all those places.
Right.
War ended, we got to Innsbruck. That was at the end. There was. Maybe you had questions before we got that far, but
yeah. Well, I guess the sequence of events sort of for the division is they pull out after a little while after taking the towns east of Bastogne. Then they're brought back down to Montmelon very briefly, and then they go to the area not too far from Strasbourg or some other places in the northeast corner of France.
Oh yeah, we went to Alsace, Lorraine, and Haguenau.
Haguenau, yeah.
Which was not, it still wasn't cleared. We went to that area.
Right.
That's part of the reason I got the French thing, because it was still French. French says you got to fight on French soil. You had to be during World War II, and you had to show courage. And by courage, you had to get either Bronze Star or better. If you didn't, you couldn't have the medal. You didn't show courage.
Okay.
So, but anyway, yeah, you're right. We did go there, and we thought we had a little rest period there for a short time. But then we continued on from there.
All right. Now, at this point, particularly once you start moving again, are you going out and looking for things to blow up, or are you following the infantry at this point?
We have our own area to cover going, with the roads, the bridges. We run into pockets of places where we had to get it cleaned up get the people through. Got into Berchtesgaden, we got a lot of champagne, a carload of it. We had a lot of foreign vehicles at that point because we didn't have a lot of our own, so we just take whatever we could find. And try to have at least one American car, whether they're American truck, so they recognize us being Americans. Yeah, that Berchtesgaden was kind of a nice place. And then I say we continued all the way from then on. Every now and then it was getting where they would give up and some wouldn't give up. And then when you got into Austria, pretty soon you see groups of people giving up, a lot of them. And
now, when you saw German soldiers surrendering or whatever, what did they look like to you? Like, how old were they, or what condition were they in?
They just looked tired and hungry. In fact, that's where our food went. American food. We didn't, have any food to eat because prisoners all got it. You had to go without. Get your own. That's a tough way, but that's the way it is.
But were you, did the Germans look like they were about your age? And
Yeah, they were there was even kids at some point, you had small kids, and women. Especially, we got some from the Air Force, mostly women from the Air Force.
Okay.
They were probably office helpers. I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure if maybe they may have used some of the anti-aircraft guns. I don't know, but which might have been run by the Air
women
Force.
I saw came out of a building from the Air Force, the Waffe.
Yeah, that was probably clerical work. And
So I thought they probably were there.
All right. Now, did the going get easier once you kind of got across the Rhine? Was the fighting less common, or?
Yeah, it started slowing up. The point seemed like right after that.
Because the 101st mostly wasn't the one that was directly attacking the Germans at that point. So somebody else was, and you were following up in most cases. So you'd find your people still resisting, but not make big attacks.
Well, no, not bigger groups. They were more eager to give up, I guess. When we got even we got to Austria, and the war wasn't quite over yet. Another guy and I, we went up the mountain. We got in that cable car. German uniformed pistols. We did too, but nobody did anything. We said, oh. So we rode about 2 miles up the mountain, up into the snow, and told me we want to do some skiing. And they said, you can't have the skis. We said, oh, we're going to do some skiing. Pretty soon we convinced them. And they gave us some skis and then laughed because I fell down all the time. But the war wasn't quite over, but there's no reason to fight at that point.
All right. And then you're in Austria when the surrender actually happens.
Yeah, we were in Austria when the war ended.
And then how long did you wind up staying there?
We stayed in Austria then until fall. Must have been August when we left Austria. I swear it was August. Then that's when we went back to Joigny, France. My outfit went to Joigny. And
then did you stay there very long, or was that just waiting to go ship home?
Yeah, it took till December before we left Antwerp, Belgium. And that's when they deactivated. They sent the ones that didn't have enough points to Germany, Berlin, and they sent the one. If you wanted to go to Berlin, you could go, but if you had enough points, wanted to go home, you could go home.
Okay.
But the ones that didn't have enough got sent there because they hadn't been in combat long enough. They hadn't enlisted. You got points for everything,
Right.
And it added up enough, and I had enough to go home,
Okay. Now, while you were in Europe there at the end of the war, Austria, Germany, France, how much did you see of the civilian population at that point?
Well, I don't think we saw too many. Now and then we saw, at least we tried not to. Because when we got to Austria, even the Austrians, we lived in a house, and they could come back and cook in the daytime, but we occupied it at night.
Right.
And they weren't allowed in there. They learned quick, because when they baked something, put it in a locked place, it unlocked it, and food was gone in the morning, and they got back. There was no food. They learned to give you some rather than have you prying everything open, And you had to go and hunt for elk to get your food, and give it to the guy down by the ski lodge, and he would cook the whole thing for you, the rear half, if you give him the front half. Because see, we used to, when we got Germany, we killed deer for them.
Right.
The Germans. And people had deer to eat. And then they finally said, you're killing too many, we don't need any more. Then when we got to Austria, we didn't have any food, so we had to hunt for elk. they went and got the first, our group did, we got an elk, and we had a party. But the next time they went out, they shot the farmer's cow.
Oh.
And the kid come down to get the cows, and it was all skinned out, this one was. Well, he went and got his dad. There was no more elk hunting.
Mm-hmm.
That was the end of elk hunting. Because, well, we took food from their gardens, vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
because I said, our military didn't feed us. There was not enough food. You had to take care of the prisoners, you know, you can't let them starve. So you take it from the Americans.
Yeah. Well, a lot of prisoners wound up not having much to eat either. That
No.
depends on where they were and that kind of thing. But basically, the supply system sort of hadn't in a way caught up with you when you're just kind of, because was it just your group kind of on your own where you were? Yeah. Yeah, so you're not big enough to get noticed even.
Yeah, it was on our own because we had to go back up the mountain and get this SS guy. There was a guy up there running it. It was a resort area
Mm-hmm.
that they took over for putting up a radar
Yeah.
and weather and everything up there on the mountain where the ski resort was. And when we was up there, this SS guy was telling this German Vermont guy, a major, giving him orders,
Mm-hmm.
and he was lower than the major.
Yeah.
And so when we went back up, he said he wasn't in charge, but we knew he was bossing the guy around, so he didn't want to go back down right away. He wanted to stay there till we took everybody out, you know. So they finally let him stay. But we knew who was in charge,
Mm-hmm.
that SS guy. So
Was he still trying to fight the war or just?
no, he just wanted to be in charge, be there. You know, there's a lot of girls there too.
Okay.
But as I said, the girls, you don't have to listen to him anymore. He's not in charge.
All right. And once the war ended, did your unit have any kind of discipline problems? Did people sort of misbehave or get out of hand or?
You talk about soldiers?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Our guys were never much for rules in the first place, you know. They, I don't know why they just didn't think they applied to them, I guess. And as the colonel said, they're terrible in the rear, but they're a hell of a good soldier on the front line.
Right.
But they're terrible in the rear because, like, you go to town. I carried a pistol to town. It's illegal, but you didn't go without it. You felt like you're naked when you took your guns off. You're no defense anymore, you know. And I wore two. I wore a pistol and a revolver. So, and I could shoot equally with either hand. It made no difference. I ended up with 9 pistols. I brought a bunch home and gave one to my brother in France after the war. I had a great big box I had packed because when they shipped the guys to Berlin, I had to close the supply room out for the company. And so you don't have any watches, they're all gone. You don't have pistols, they're all gone. All lost due to enemy action, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That makes the book 0.
Right.
Oh, everything was gone with enemy action.
All right.
But I got it closed out and balanced the books out to 0 before we left Austria, and there was nothing there.
All right. Now, while you were in Germany, did you ever see any like sort of the displaced persons or refugees or things like that?
Yes. Here's some that didn't make it.
Mm. And
Those
was that?
are prisoners at Landsberg, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a mistake letting them out. Now we didn't give much thought to it. You would have, we took and opened the gates up and just let them go. But you can't do that with these people. They're mentally unbalanced, really. They've been in their prison, starved to death,
Mm-hmm.
and they turn them loose. We did. We had to round them up and put them back in there, you know. We didn't think of that when we turned them out, you know. They wanted guns to kill the Germans,
Mm-hmm.
and they were hunting for them. So we learned that the hard way because it's a sad thing to have to put them back in, you know, after they'd been freed,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
But a lot of them, I mean, you had the picture, these were emaciated bodies and that kind of thing. I mean, what we see out
Those
of the
people will starve to death if
Yeah.
you see on that pile.
Yeah. So they probably weren't in very good physical shape either, most of them.
No, the people that walk on look just like those.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So okay, and then at that point, did you know anything about what the Germans had done in terms of the death camps and that kind of stuff? Okay. And did you get taken to any of those, or just told about it?
Well, we didn't see any they cremated anybody. These were just the ones they just let starve to death.
Right.
They kept in barracks and they just starved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was a concentration camp where there was the effort to exterminate the Jews and the undesirables, and then there were all the other people they had who were basically slave laborers who they worked to death, maybe Poles or other people like that, and you get those. Yeah. So gave you some idea of what you were fighting against, I expect.
Yeah.
All right. So now you finally get to the end of the year. I guess in that last few months when you're in France, did you get to travel around at all or get into Paris or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I went, as I say, we were in Antwerp. Well, I was at Zell, which is before Antwerp. I went into my brother's camp. He had a camp short ways from Paris, but he was in Marseille. So I stayed one night there, and then I went into Paris and stayed a couple nights. And I knew I was going to Joigny. We were moving there. Some guys went from Paris to Joigny. I, like an idiot, went from Paris clear back to Joigny and then back to France. And my brother was waiting for me at that point. And that's when I opened the case up, said, pick out a pistol you want, you can have a pistol. So he took one, and then I went with him back to his camp. That first night we were back to France, I went with him over to his base. And but he couldn't write home saying he was going to go to Pacific. Because I told him they were shipping them to Pacific because Japan was still fighting.
Yeah.
And so I could say it, but I didn't say it either. And when I got home, he was home, of course, because the war had already ended, you know.
Right.
Japan too, but.
Okay. So he beat you home. Okay. Now, what was the trip home like? Or
That was rough. That was December, traveling the North Atlantic in storms all the way. Some days you could go 24 hours, make 24 miles, make about a mile an hour.
What kind of ship were you on?
A Smith's Victory Liberty ship of 1,500 people.
Okay.
Different than the Queen Elizabeth, you know. That big one, you hardly felt the waves. But that was December storms in the North Atlantic.
Right.
And they're terrible. 40-foot waves go right over the boat. And some boats broke up, I understand.
A couple broke. I'm not sure any totally sank.
Some lost their props, they say.
Yeah. And I think one broke in half or something, but they
yeah.
stuck another half on it. But
when the waves would come up, they looked like mountains. When we first started out, we left Antwerp, Belgium. We were going to be home at Christmas. We wasn't halfway home by then. Sat there, and he says, the storm's not going to let up, we might as well go. I thought, what an idiot. Just because the storm won't let up, you go out into it? We could have went for the day.
Yeah.
So he said, we'll go. First day out, waves were, I say, looked like mountains. We were on the deck, and the waves came right over at the top. One guy was above the railing. He wondered he wasn't in the ocean. And from then on, we never could be outside on the deck all the way. And we changed from Boston to New York the last day. And that's the only day you could get out on the deck from the storms. And everything was wrecked inside. The galley was wrecked. Everybody vomited all over the place. And that thing was almost capsized sometimes. And it would come out of the water, and those anchors would go bam, bam, bam. And the props would shake the ship like this, you know, just vibrate.
how did the crew behave during all of this? Did they think they were going to
see the crew.
Okay.
No, they were the only ones that could go outside if they were going to go outside. Because the first guy was sopping wet when one of our guys got caught out there right out of Antwerp. And so I wrote down, I have the complete course written in the book right over there. I can plot it across the whole map from...
How many days did it take?
seems like it took about 12. Took over twice. We were going halfway over, and we were supposed to be home by Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And at one time, they decided to turn around and go back to Europe. And then he changed his mind again. And said, then they changed from Boston to New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and said, we'll go on to New York.
All right. And so you finally get back and get into New York, and now what do they do with you?
Well, they sent us to a camp, and everybody, well, not everybody, I didn't go for New Year's down to Times Square. A lot of people did. They spent that night in Times Square. Not me. I went to bed. I wanted to rest up.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, where do they discharge you there?
From there, I ended up in Fort Sheridan,
Mm-hmm.
and was discharged at Fort Sheridan.
Okay. And now what do you do when you get back home? Or do you go back home?
Yeah, I visit my folks and my relatives, and then I come to Grand Rapids, and I got a job eventually at Calvin. Well, I worked Calvinator first, and that's when I didn't go to work a day or so. Something happened. I said, "Oh, I'll go back in the Army." You know, you can't stand the civilian life; it's
Mm-hmm.
terrible. So I went back and signed up for 3 years for the 82nd Airborne,
Mm-hmm.
and I said I'd go overseas because I thought I had to, and they said you don't have to go over. You already did, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I'll take the States, and so I went to 82nd and Airborne down at Fort Bragg. Had 90 days delay en route. That's when I met my wife. You know, during that 90 days, you know, the last of it, and I decided to get married, and that was the third date. I wasn't on a rush it, so I waited till the third date to get married. Decided to get married, and we got married in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then I called the general down at Fort Bragg, because I don't fool with the little captains, you know. I called the general, and I said, "Sir, I would like at least another week home, you know." And he said, "Well, how long have you been home?" And I said, 90 days. He said, 90 days? What do you want another week for? I said, "Well, sir, I just got married, and I would like another week home, you know." He said, "Okay, take it, you know." And I understand I'm AWOL.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I am, because I have no paperwork. So we got married, and we took off for Fort Bragg after a while, and I got stopped by the MPs.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at my paper and said, "You're AWOL." And I said, "I know." They said, "As long as you're going back to camp, we'll let you go, you know."
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Okay." So I went back to camp. When I got down there, they assigned me to G Company, the 504 Regiment. And I said, "Okay." So what happened was that when I enlisted, I was assigned to the other regiment or company it was, not that one. Well, now I'm still AWOL, so I get a letter. What they sent my folks: "You've been AWOL for 30 days. Report for duty." You know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been down there trying to get pay. You know, my
Yeah.
wife and I were living in Fort Bragg, and I said, "I've been here all the time. You just assigned me to a different one." So they said, "Well, we got money here. You want it?" And I said, "No, I just got a supplemental pay over in the other one there, so I don't need that one." But that's how they got mixed up on that one. And but I lived off the post. I had a room at the end of the barracks where I kept my clothes and stuff. And I lived in town, and I'd get up and get my wife breakfast and get in the car, and I'd fall the guys out of bed early in the morning, and then have reveille, and then work call, and then I'd do a lot of the work around the orderly room and make the reports. But they wouldn't promote me because they had promoted people so many times that they couldn't do the job.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, "From now on, we're going to let you do the job, and then if you can do it, we will give you the promotion, you know."
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I got sick before that. I got my promotion. In fact, I turned down staff sergeant in Europe. My company commander wanted to move me up to staff, and I said, "Nah." He said, "Yeah, I'll promote you as a staff, because then if you ever want to enlist, you already got staff." I said, "No, I never planned on enlisting, you know."
Okay. But the staff sergeant, that wasn't contingent on staying in Europe longer?
No.
If he promoted you there?
No,
Okay.
no. No, you know, seeing what happened in Europe too, we was talking about jumping. To stay on jump pay, you had to make a jump after the war.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't, you were taken off jump pay, but you could stay in your outfit. They wouldn't transfer you out. So I said, okay. So I went, made the jump. Came back down because they said, well, how was it? I said, fine. They said, you liked it really well? I said, yeah. They said, would you jump again if you had a chance? And I said, sure. And they said, we happen to have an opening. I said, give me a chute. And I went and got right back in the plane,
Mm-hmm.
went back up again, made 2 jumps that day.
Right. So how long did you wind up actually staying in the 82nd?
Just for that period of time when I went reported in April, and then got sick in July and came home in October because I was at Swannanoa, North Carolina, more general.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want them cutting me up out there at Fitzsimmons, or because you know you don't have a thing to say what they do to you. They just come get you and do it.
Yeah. What kind of medical condition did you have?
TB.
Okay.
I was bleeding, blood coming out my mouth. You know,
Okay.
blood.
That's bad.
Bright red. It was arterial blood.
Okay.
And a lot of people bleed to death.
Now, how did they control that?
I had to control it, invented it myself to start with, which is impossible, but you do it. I had to not cough, not clear your throat. Because every time you coughed, it started bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you cleared the cloud out, it would bleed. And so it got where it bled a little, quite a bit. And then they just decided to give me air to collapse that lung, to press it down so it wouldn't move anymore at that point. So they just shoved a needle through and
Okay.
put air in there and make your lung collapse. And that was over 10 years, 12 years. I had that every week. First time they numbed it, and I said, that's no good. Just shove that needle right through there. I don't want any more of that numbing. So I just lay down, they go, needle go right between the ribs, and they put air in.
All right.
No more numbing.
But rather than stay, because again, I understand it, if you stayed in the military, you'd have to let them treat you however they felt like treating
That's
you,
right.
which probably meant an operation.
They did several things. Cut a lobe out, or cut the whole lung out,
Mm-hmm.
or cut some ribs out and put a big weight and make a big hole down in there to stop the lung from working.
Mm-hmm.
Now out here a lot of times they cut the phrenic nerve to bring the diaphragm come up. And sometimes that didn't go back down. They said it would, but it doesn't.
All right. Now, were you able to work and do things in that when you were getting treated after that, or?
I spent almost 2 years in the hospital. And then I decided to go to school, get my degree. And I had a high school diploma that I got without going to school.
How did that happen?
I went to Alma High and said I want to see where I have to start for high school. So I spent 10 hours, 2 different days outside the superintendent's office taking timed tests.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you made it all the way through. So they put me down for graduation that year, so I got a diploma from Alma High.
Okay.
But then when I got ready to go to college, they said, you didn't take the units. Okay. So it took me 15 months to do all the courses
Mm-hmm.
while I'm at college at Ferris.
Okay.
And then I go ahead, and so I did my high school and college in 48 months. It took me to get my high school and my college degree
Mm-hmm.
in teaching and chemical. I had a bachelor in science.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taught a little bit, principal of the school. I resigned. I just signed up, and after the first semester I resigned. That coming fall I took over. I'd been out about 4 years, and then they called me from Ferris, said the principal left from Augusta and wanted to know if I would take the job. I said, I talked to him on Saturday, said, okay, I'll start on Monday. So I went up and started teaching and principal on Monday the second semester, and then I signed a contract for the coming year. And then Lear Siegler called me, Lear at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'll work for you for the summer, but not permanently. I already have a contract already. Well, they talked and talked and talked because they had an opening for an engineer,
Mm-hmm.
materials engineer. Finally, I wrote the letter of resignation to the school boards. When they came to town that fall for an MEA meeting, I got a call from one of the teachers and said, I told him you probably went back to working in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, Ray, I took your word for it. I've never broken a contract in my life. But I said, you told me you wouldn't hesitate. And so he said, yeah, that's what I told him. So then I worked there for 33 years for aerospace.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I gave a talk out to Grand Valley too.
Okay.
At the chemistry class one year. I was out there using the infrared spectrograph, and they asked me if I would talk on how it was in industry, you know,
Sure.
all the chemical stuff.
All right.
Because I didn't want to, because I said, they know more about books than I do. And he said, we want to know what it's like out there in the world, not what's in the books. you
Right.
know.
Okay. Now, did the experience you have in the military, did that help you, or was it really the
I
college
think it
class work that
probably,
you did?
I think it, well, I guess I was always interested in science, and then I felt working with explosives stuff kind of moved me along. You know, I had learned all the chemistry of every kind of explosives there
Mhm.
was, you know, gun-cotton, primacord, and ammonium nitrate, and different kinds, you know. And so they gave me, I took tests, and they gave me, I could be a teacher, a minister, or a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
It's the three choices they gave me, working with people. And, well, I didn't have enough money to be a doctor. My doctor said, you could have made it. And I said, yeah, who's going to finance me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have, because I enjoyed doing that too.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I did partly that industrial hygiene when I was at work. I got that job too. But, yeah, it was, and I liked teaching. It was fun.
All right. I guess to look back at the time that you spent in the service, overall, what do you think you took out of that, or how did that affect you?
Well, I think working with people, I like that. I think there too. And I got along with the people because sometimes I was called too GI, but as I told them, if I get it, you get it. And when I teach, honest but fair.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the way I am. I mean, you know, I'm not going to be unfair. And when you guys, I'd let them rate me, and I said, I don't care what you think of me. If you really believe it, put it on paper. They'd say, but you haven't given us our final exam yet. I said, it has nothing to do with that yet.
Well, that's the era before teacher
But,
evaluations. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. I told them, if you think I should be thrown out the window, say so, if you really believe it. You know?
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, it makes for a great story. So thank you very much for taking the time to share it today.
Well, you're welcome. My wife says I'm crazy to give because I usually don't. She says, why are you doing it? I said, well, they said they want it for history, posterity or something.
Yeah. Well, posterity appreciates it.